Hello! Thank you for joining me for video 4 on my high note mini-series. This video is on the zona de passaggio. The zona de passaggio is the so-called mixed range, as defined by myself, but also the people that I study like Richard Miller and Shirley Emmons and stuff like that, is the area between the primo and secondo passaggios. In the female voice, you have the middle ranges. This is where the magic happens, in my opinion. Because if we navigate this area of our voice effectively, then we facilitate the smooth transition across it, thereby opening up our upper registers, getting into our head voice in a sustainable way that will sound good, sound consistent, have good intonation, and all that kind of stuff. It removes or helps us to navigate many of the difficulties that we often encounter in our singing. And how is it that we do this? Well, quite frankly, I've talked about it in every video leading up to this, in part. It starts with the thyroarytenoid dominant singing voice and establishing good vowel alignment and good subglottic air pressure. Exercises like that. And that one, which also practices tonal onsets, the short notes all require us to do a tonal onset, and practicing them so that they're balanced. Those practices start the process of facilitating good technique in the zona de passaggio. From the other side, or one might say above the secondo passaggio, exercises like I showed you in the video on cricothyroid dominant singing, or the higher pitches. You, head voice I meant to say there. You, that hollow one. You. That practice, even though it sounds different, of consistently accessing the upper register and being able to exit it and then re-enter and exit and get back and forth like that, sets the stage for our practice in the zona de passaggio. And what happens in the zona de passaggio? Initially, the conversation turns towards vowel modifications. Now, if you haven't heard of vowel modifications, allow me to introduce it to you now. Vowel modifications are what we call the subtle changes to any of the cardinal vowels as we approach the secondo passaggio from below, or from any direction really, because even if you're descending, you're going to have to do the modification. But we change these vowels in order to help balance out the subglottic air pressure and vocal fold engagement so that we facilitate a smooth transition. Let me just show you, rather than trying to digest all of that. If I sing E here, E, I don't really have to do much with it except make sure that I've got a reasonable amount of expansion and engagement, and that I'm keeping air moving over the vocal fold, and I'm focused on the E vowel. I'm not doing any, I already have good vowel alignment, so I'm not struggling with E or anything like that, just a solid vowel. E. That vowel, however, here, because that top note in this scale is in my zona de passaggio, I know that the vowel is going to subtly change. I am going to exaggerate it here. E. Hopefully you can hear that. It goes from E to I and back to E. What we learn to do, though, is only enough of it so that we still are clearly singing E. E. But the subtle modification to the vowel facilitates good entry to the zona de passaggio and good exit. And these subtle modifications, as we go higher and higher, facilitate that transition over the secondo passaggio. We are literally pivoting throughout the whole thing, going from thyroarytenoid dominant or chest voice below it to cricothyroid dominant above it. So like my secondo passaggio is somewhere in that, like somewhere in the middle of all that. I started in the key of G, and I think I ended in the key of D major. So that means that in that last key area, my secondo passaggio was the third note from the bottom. You can rewind and listen again if you want. The point is, by practicing the vowel modifications in the zona di passaggio, we set it up so that we're going to make a nice smooth transition across the secondo passaggio. And this is another reason why I just don't refer to the secondo passaggio in the common terminology for it, which is, people say it's the break. Because when we do those subtle changes approaching the secondo passaggio, it doesn't feel like a dramatic chunk clicking over or clicking back. It all gets much smoother, and we get more consistency of tone quality, more consistency of intonation, and ultimately more sustainability of our voices, because I'm not straining in any way to do these things. Now, I'm certainly engaged and expanded and I'm working here, but these big muscles can easily take that. The small muscles at the larynx don't really deal with, especially the thyroarytenoid muscles, don't deal with being forced over and over and over again and again and again to deal with high amounts of air pressure, subglottic air pressure, and high amounts of muscle tension. That's how we start getting into vocal fatigue, and ultimately can have, you know, nodes and things like that. Now, I don't like to be alarmist about those things. You got to really do a lot of that to get to nodules and nodes, and, you know, or the precursor to all that are polyps. But making this transition, facilitating the transition, gives you the option, even if you don't do it all the time, of having a different tone color, but also increasing your overall sustainability of your voice. So we practice those vowel modifications into the zona di passaggio. We practice accessing our cricothyroid dominant singing voice from above, and then ultimately going back to it and making that switch in and out and decreasing the interval that we have to deal with it. And we start to practice putting all of this together. So in a one octave arpeggio, you have a lot of time, or I should say space between pitches, to make that transition. In a triad, you have much less space. And the third of the triad requires a vowel modification. We practice those in different exercises, and then we put them into the triad. And then we get the triads going up and down. And eventually we get a descending scale in there too. And as those things become our habits, we get descending arpeggios and ascending scales, and ultimately ascending scales, and whatever it is you happen to be singing. Now, long before you get to scale patterns, it pays to start practicing some of these concepts in your repertoire, because that way you can facilitate the incorporation of the technique into what you're singing and that reinforces the whole practice. So the zona de passaggio is where it all starts to come together, where vowel alignment in the chest voice, access to the head voice, airflow, tonal onset, vowel alignment, and vowel modification all comes together there, and hence why learning to access voce piena in testa, learning to make that happen, the sound of chest voice in head, can be kind of tricky because there's a lot of things that have to come together all at one time. And I'm going to wrap all of this up and talk to you about just how I propose you put this all together in the next video. Thank you so much for watching. Take really good care of your voices. I'll see you in video 5 where I give you a wrap up on all this, and I'll see you again.